My girlfriend used my credit cards on her affair while I was deployed overseas, so I froze the accounts and let her face eviction alone with no warning. I'm a 27-year-old Army specialist, and before my last deployment, I made the biggest mistake of my life. Her name was Rachel. We'd been together for 3 years, laughing through late-night takeout, dreaming about houses we couldn't afford yet, talking about kids like we were already halfway there. She wasn't perfect, but neither was I. What mattered was, I thought she had my back. I thought she was my person. When the deployment orders came in, 9 months overseas, I felt this pit in my stomach. Not about the danger, not about the job, but about leaving her behind. We had an apartment together. I'd just paid off the car. She didn't make much, so I left her with everything's passwords, even my emergency credit card. I told her, use it only if you really need to. I trust you, she cried at the airport, buried her face in my chest, and promised she'd be waiting when I came back. I'll be right here, she whispered. This is your dream. I've got things covered. I believed her, but on the plane, with my duffel at my feet and my unit around me, I kept running that last hug through my head. It didn't feel anchored. Her voice cracked, but her eyes were dry. Something felt off. Still, I told myself it was just nerves. I'd be away for almost a year. Of course, she was overwhelmed. Of course, I was so. I pushed the doubts down, like I always had. We were solid. We were serious. We'd made it through worse. At least, that's what I told myself. Because if I hadn't trusted her, that die wouldn't be sitting here telling you how completely, utterly wrong I was before I left. I bought an engagement ring. It wasn't flashy, just a simple gold band with a single diamond, but it had taken me months to save for it. I kept it hidden in a sock at the back of my drawer, thinking I'd come home, take her out to the cabin where we celebrated our first anniversary, and finally ask her to marry me. That was the plan. We used to talk about our future like it was already written. She wanted 2 kids, maybe 3, a house with a porch swing, a golden retriever named Duke. She even made Pinterest boards for wedding ideas, sent me cake pictures and centerpieces, while I was on base like it was some inside joke. I'll be your army wife, she said once, lying next to me in bed, tracing my dog tags with her fingers. I'll be waiting for you at every homecoming. I was all in. So when I left, even with the tight knot in my chest, I believed in us. I emailed whenever I could. Sent care packages back with little souvenirs from the base. Every message from her became a lifeline. But the longer I was gone, the shorter her replies got. First, it was, sorry, been crazy at work. Then it became, can't talk now, with friends. And then, nothing, gaps. Days between replies, I'd ask, is everything okay back home? She'd type back, why are you acting like this? I'm fine. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But the silence between us started to feel louder than anything she was saying. Still, I told myself it was the distance, that this was what long distance looked like, that once I was home, everything would go back to normal. God. I wish I'd listened to that unease instead. About 3 months into my deployment, I got an email from my bank. It was an automated fraud alert, one of those messages that's supposed to catch suspicious purchases. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe Rachel had used the card to buy something outside her usual spending habits. That's what it was, for emergencies, groceries, bills. But when I logged in to check the statement, my stomach dropped. Over $7,000 spent in less than 8 weeks. High-end spa appointments, designer shoes, steakhouse dinners, a luxury hotel in our own city. Not once, multiple times. She was living like a celebrity off a card that was meant for rent and food. I stared at the screen, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. Maybe she was treating herself while I was gone. Maybe she was just overwhelmed and splurging to cope. But even as I thought it, I didn't believe it. This wasn't emotional spending, this was calculated indulgence. The hotel charges stood out the most. A place we'd only ever talked about going to for a honeymoon. 1 night, 2 nights, 3, all on my card. Same hotel, different weekends. Always to people on the reservation. I called the front desk, pretending to be the guest hit was easy enough with my name on the billing. When I asked, the receptionist said, oh yes, that was a couple's package. A cold flush ran through my body. I emailed Rachel that night, tried to keep it calm. Just asked, hey, I saw some unusual charges on the card. Everything okay? She didn't reply for 24 hours, and when she finally did, all she wrote was, "Don't worry about it. I've got it handled." I remember just staring at those words, like they were written in fire. I didn't sleep that night. Something about her message, "I've got it handled," hit me like a punch in the gut. She didn't deny the charges, didn't explain, just brushed it off like I was an inconvenience. The next morning, I got a message from James, a buddy I went to high school with. He still lived in the city and followed Rachel on Instagram. We weren't super close anymore, but he'd seen one of her posts and decided to check in. His message read, "Hey man, didn't want to overstep, but are you and Rachel still together?" I felt my pulse spike. "Yeah, why?" I replied. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, 5 screenshots came through. Rachel, dressed to the nines, holding hands across a candlelit dinner table, champagne flutes, hotel robes. One photo had her legs draped over a man's lap by a fireplace, his face just out of frame. The captions were worse. "He knows what I need. When real love doesn't have to hide, finally choosing myself." I just sat there in the mess tent, my phone glowing in my palm, heart pounding like it was trying to break through my chest. James followed up. "If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. I just didn't feel right keeping this to myself." I thanked him, told him I appreciated it, but I don't remember what else I said. Everything blurred after that. The sounds of the bass faded into a dull roar. All I could hear was my own blood rushing through my ears. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't stress. This was betrayal, bold, loud, and shameless. And worst of all, I was thousands of miles away, watching it all happen from behind a screen. I tried calling her the moment I got back to my cot. It was almost 3 a.m. back home, but I didn't care. She didn't answer. I called again, straight to voicemail. Then again, and again. Nothing. I left a voice message. "Rachel, I need to talk to you now." No response. So I sent a message. I saw the photos. "Tell me what the hell is going on." Still nothing. For the first time since deployment, I couldn't feel the ground beneath me. It was like free-falling inside my own body. My hands were trembling not from fear but from this deep, buried rage I didn't know I was capable of feeling. The next morning, I got a reply. One line. "You're paranoid. I'm not doing this with you right now." No explanation. No apology. Just dismissal. I read that sentence so many times I could see it even when I closed my eyes. I stared at it until my vision blurred. That was the moment everything cracked. Asterisk, I wasn't just hurt, I was furious. The kind of fury that simmers in your chest and makes your fingers curl. Not just because she cheated, not just because she lied, but because she was acting like I was the problem, like I was crazy for connecting the dots. She left scattered in plain sight. So I started screenshotting everything. The messages, the bank statements, the hotel bookings, her Instagram captions. I didn't know what I was going to do with it all yet, but I knew I couldn't keep pretending I didn't know the truth. She had crossed a line, multiple lines, and the worst part? She thought she was getting away with it. There's betrayal land, then there's this. I went back through the credit card statement, line by line, with a kind of morbid curiosity. I started matching dates from the charges to her Instagram posts. And what I found made my skin crawl. The fancy steakhouse. That was the same night she posted a story with the caption, "Best meal of my life, the rooftop bar downtown." Same day she wrote, "City nights with someone who gets it." The hotel. She posted a picture of champagne on the windowsill, my champagne. Paid for with my card. This wasn't just cheating. This was planned, rehearsed, public eye. Even found a charge for a couple's massage. I remembered when she once said massages made her uncomfortable, that she didn't like strangers touching her. I guess comfort isn't an issue when someone else is footing the bill. And that cabin in the woods? It wasn't just a coincidence. It was ours. The place we'd gone on our first anniversary, she took him there. Booked the same suite, same hot tub, same goddamn fireplace. And she used the same card I gave her in case of emergency. I felt sick. Like actually nauseous. I was sitting in a war zone, wearing 40 pounds of gear. And suddenly, it was Rachel, making me feel like I couldn't breathe. I emailed her again. "Are you seriously using my card to take another guy to the places we made memories?" No answer, nothing but silence. A silence that screamed, "Yes, and I don't care." I thought betrayal would feel like a knife. But this. This felt like being bled out slowly while she smiled and kept spending. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't want to confront her, I wanted to. Badly. I imagined storming into the apartment, slamming down the receipts, screaming until my lungs gave out. But I realized something. She was already digging her own grave. Every charge, every caption, every careless story post she shared it was evidence. Proof that she wasn't just cheating, she was flaunting it. And the more I thought about confronting her directly, the more I realized it would just feed her sense of control. Let her think she was untouchable. Let her feel safe. For now, so I went silent. I started documenting everything meticulously. Every transaction, every photo, every vague excuse she sent. I even kept track of timestamps and cross-referenced them with Instagram locations. I was building a case not just for myself, but for the satisfaction of seeing her consequences land squarely where they belonged. I looked into my legal options too. Credit freezes, fraud reports, tenant rights. She had my apartment, my furniture, my trust, and apparently a plan to bleed me dry. But I realized something powerful. I could take all of it back, and I wasn't going to warn her. I started fantasizing about the moment she would wake up, thinking everything was fine, and suddenly realize she had no money, no access, no support, and no excuses. That day would be hers alone. She would have to face the chaos she created. It was a strange mix of dread and satisfaction. Dread, because I was still thousands of miles away, helpless to act immediately. Satisfaction, because for the first time, I felt in control of something after months of helplessness. I smiled for the first time in weeks, not because I wanted to hurt her, but because I knew the truth. She had no idea what was coming, and that's when I discovered who he really was. James messaged me again, almost hesitantly this time. This guy she's seeing, his name's Zach, you need to know. I froze. Zach, the same guy she'd casually mentioned once in passing during a conversation about her coworker. Nothing alarming back then, just a name. But now, seeing it attached to all those posts, those charges, that betrayal, my stomach churned. James had dug deeper. He sent me screenshots of Zach's social media. Divorced, mid-30s, flashy car, gym selfies that screamed vanity. I cross-referenced the locations from Rachel's post, so every single one matched his check-ins. Every hotel, every dinner, every spa visit, it was him. It had always been him. And I had been funding their entire little romance while wearing my uniform overseas. I felt a mix of fury, disgust, and disbelief. How could someone I trusted so fully, someone I let into the core of my life, betray me like this? The fact that it was so calculated, it wasn't just emotional cheating. It was financial exploitation too. I reread her messages in my head, the casual dismissals, the "don't worry about it" line. It wasn't just flippant, it was malicious. She knew what she was doing, and she wanted me out of the picture while she lived like I wasn't even a factor. I couldn't sleep that night. My bunk felt suffocating, the ceiling oppressive. I imagined her and Zach laughing in the hotel room, drinking champagne I'd paid for. My hands clenched around my phone. Rage bubbled up until it was nearly unbearable. But then, a thought hit me. One simple, terrifyingly satisfying thought. I didn't need to chase her. I didn't need to beg for honesty. I could let her face the consequences herself. And that's when I realized Di wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to make sure she understood exactly what she'd lost. About a week later, I got another email from my bank. At first I thought it was another fraud alert for the same card, but the subject line was different. New credit application in progress. I frowned. I hadn't applied for anything. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was a credit card application in my name, same address, same phone number, same everything. The only thing off was the IP address. It was local, back home. She was trying to open another line of credit. Under my name, while I was deployed overseas, that was it. The last thread of hesitation snapped. Up until then, I'd been angry, sure, but this was theft, fraud. A deliberate attempt to squeeze more out of me while I couldn't defend myself. I called the bank immediately from the base phone. The representative froze the application and flagged it for investigation. Then they asked if I wanted to press charges. I didn't say yes, not yet, because pressing charges meant ending it now, and I wasn't done. Not until she felt it that night, lying in my bunk. I stared at the canvas ceiling and whispered to myself, "She's about to learn what it's like to be powerless." I started listing out every account she had access, 2 credit cards, joint bills, even my autopay setup. I checked the rent, utilities, everything. She was using my money to maintain the illusion of her new, perfect life. Without me, it would collapse like a house of cards. So I planned it carefully. I'd wait until rent was due, until she thought everything was fine, and then I'd pull the plug. No warnings, no fight, just silence and consequences. It was time to stop being the one who suffered. It was time to become the storm. I waited until the calendar showed the first of the month's rent day. I wanted her to wake up believing everything was under control, that the world was still spinning in her favor. Then I sat down at the base computer lab and began dismantling the life she'd built on my dime. One by one, I called every bank, canceled cards, changed PINs, locked online accounts and froze credit lines. Each click felt like reclaiming a piece of my dignity. I even notified my landlord that no future rent payments were to come from my account. If she wanted a roof, she could pay for it herself. By the time I was done, my hands were shaking, not from anger, but relief. For months, I'd felt powerless, watching her spend my money and my trust like they were nothing. Now I finally had control again. I timed it perfectly. 2 days later, the automatic rent withdrawal failed. Her credit card declined at a boutique. Her utilities bounced. By that evening, every account was locked. I imagined her at a checkout counter, handing over my card with that smug smile, then hearing the beep of decline. My phone buzzed with notifications all night, emails from the banks confirming closures, security alerts, reset confirmations. Each one was like a heartbeat, steady and satisfying. When I finally lay back in my cot, I could almost hear her panic echoing across the ocean. The scramble of someone who'd built her comfort on a foundation she never owned. I didn't know how she'd react yet. Would she plead? Would she rage? Maybe both. But I was done answering to her chaos. From now on, she could drown in the mess she made. And when my phone started blowing up with calls from her the next morning, I knew the storm had landed by the next morning. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls, texts, emails, Instagram, DMEs. Her name flashed on the screen like a warning. The rent didn't go through. Why are my car payments declined? We need to talk now. I stared at them all. My hands trembled, but I didn't respond. Not one word. Not a single call returned. Hours passed, then hours more. And still, she kept sending messages. The panic escalating. Voice notes flooded in sobbing, pleading, desperate. I can't believe this is happening. Please, just tell me what's going on. I read each one slowly, savoring the weight of silence I now held over her. The irony wasn't lost on me. Months ago, I'd been the one helpless, thousands of miles away, powerless to stop what she was doing. Now she was alone, scrambling, and I could only watch. She sent one last text before noon. I'm scared. I have nowhere to go, please. I didn't think it would be like this. The guilt in her words would have been enough to shake someone else. Not me. I'd already processed the anger, the heartbreak, the humiliation. I was done letting her control my emotions. Instead, I made a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and listened to the city waking up back home. The sunlight spilled across my chest, and I felt calm. Finally, I knew she was learning, in real time, what it felt like to be powerless. Every declined transaction, every bounced payment, every locked door was a lesson she couldn't ignore. And still, I didn't move. I let the silence do its work. Because sometimes, the most devastating revenge isn't in yelling, it's in doing nothing at all and letting them fall. A couple of days later, the fallout started spreading. Rachel had figured out what I'd done. Of course she had, but instead of owning up, she went full victim mode. She called my mom, crying over the phone, claiming I'd abandoned her financially. She messaged mutual friends, telling them I was controlling, cruel, and unpredictable. She even posted vague, dramatic updates on Facebook, hoping to get sympathy from strangers. At first, I panicked. I thought, maybe they'll believe her. Maybe I need to explain myself. But then I remembered the mountain of evidence. I had screenshots, receipts, Instagram posts, timestamps, messages. Every lie she told, I had proof to disprove. One by one, I sent it to everyone she had contacted. No need for drama, just the facts, plain and simple. My friends and family could see the truth instantly. People started reaching out to me, apologizing for doubting, asking if I was okay. Meanwhile, Rachel's narrative started crumbling. People stopped responding to her messages. Her posts that were meant to gather sympathy went unanswered. The pity party she had counted on dissolved before her eyes. I could almost hear her thoughts across the miles. How is he proving everything? How is he getting away with this? And I smiled. Not because I wanted to hurt her further, but because finally, her lies weren't enough to shield her from reality. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of control that wasn't about anger, it was about reclaiming my dignity. She had used my love, my trust, and my money as a shield. Now that shield was gone, and she had to face the consequences on her own. But the story wasn't over. She wasn't just losing friends, and sympathy. She was about to hit rock bottom. A week later, my mom called me, her voice tight with worry. "Rachel's here. She says she has nowhere to go. She's saying she's pregnant." I froze. My stomach dropped so fast, I almost couldn't breathe. A pregnancy. Was this a lie, a manipulation, or something real? I could hear my mom pleading in the background, trying to figure out what to do. I stayed calm for her sake. "Don't let her in," I said firmly. "She's already created enough chaos. Let her face this herself." I could hear the panic in my mom's voice, mixed with confusion. "Sapanchi says she's scared. She has no money, no one." I told her again, firmly. She made her choices. She'll have to live with them. You don't get involved this time. And she did. She didn't let Rachel inside. I later learned my mom handed her the official fraud report my bank had sent to the apartment, proof that every charge, every expense, had been documented and flagged. Rachel stared at it like someone had punched her in the gut. I could almost picture her trembling hands, the pale face, the realization sinking in. The empire she thought she'd built on my money, my trust, and my silence, crumbling, and no one was there to catch her. She left my parents' house that day, defeated, broken, and alone. That's the moment I knew she had hit her absolute rock bottom. For the first time, I felt a sense of justice. Not because I wanted her to suffer, but because the betrayal I'd endured was finally balanced by reality. But this wasn't just about revenge anymore when I returned from deployment. Things would change drastically. When my deployment ended, I walked into the apartment I thought I'd left in good hands. It was stripped bare. Furniture gone. My kitchen gadgets, everything I'd spent years collecting vent. Even small things, like the coffee mugs she knew I loved, were gone. For a moment, my chest tightened, a familiar pang of anger and disappointment. But then I realized I didn't care. I took a deep breath, letting the smell of the empty apartment fill my lungs. The silence wasn't sad. It was a canvas. I started reclaiming my space immediately. Locks changed. Walls repainted. Furniture replaced. New carpets, new curtains, new everything. I made the apartment mine again. I went through my bank accounts, ensuring no lingering access remained. Every shared password was changed. Every account secured. Bills and utilities were fully under my control. The house that had been her playground for betrayal was now a fortress of my own design. It wasn't just about reclaiming objects, it was reclaiming dignity. For months, I'd felt powerless, watching her spend my money and betray my trust. Now, I felt strong, grounded, free. I even laughed when I found old remnants of her escapades, tiny notes, receipts, and a champagne cork tucked in a drawer. I threw them away without a second thought. That life gone. The apartment was quiet, orderly, safe. It smelled like fresh paint and new beginnings. And as I stood in the middle of the living room, looking at the empty shelves and polished floors, I realized something. I didn't just get my apartment back. I got myself back, and that's when I knew the real confrontation was over. But seeing her face again in public would be something entirely different. It had been almost a year since Rachel and I had last spoken. I was at the grocery store, minding my own business, when I saw her. She was standing in the produce aisle, fumbling with a list, looking smaller than I remembered. Her hair was messy, clothes a little worn, the confident swagger she used to carry completely gone. For a split second, I felt a flicker of something: curiosity, sadness. Then I remembered everything: the stolen money, the lies, the empty promises. The way she thought she could manipulate me while I was risking my life halfway across the world. She noticed me. froze, and opened her mouth. I could see the apology forming, the excuses she'd rehearsed 1,000 times in her head. But I didn't flinch. I didn't respond. I simply nodded, walked past her, and kept my eyes forward. There was no satisfaction in shouting at her, no victory in confrontation. The power had shifted long ago. I was free. I wasn't tethered to her chaos anymore. I felt light, unburdened. The weight of months of anxiety, anger, and heartbreak had lifted. I realized that her attempt to control me, to manipulate and betray, had failed spectacularly. She may have wanted me to see her, to acknowledge her presence, but I didn't give her that. I didn't give her anything, and as I walked away, I knew, finally, I was done being her victim. I was free, whole, and unshakable. But reflecting on everything, I couldn't help but think. Some battles aren't fought in person. Some victories are quiet, lasting, and entirely yours. Looking back, I realize now that the real battlefield wasn't always overseas. Sure, I faced danger, uncertainty, and fear every day in uniform, but nothing I encountered there compared to the betrayal I endured at home. Rachel's deceit, her calculated lies, her audacity to take advantage of my trust while I was thousands of miles away. It cut deeper than any combat wound ever could. I've spent months reflecting on it, writing it all down and talking to friends who have faced similar betrayals. And through it, I learned something powerful. Boundaries aren't just about protecting your possessions, they're about protecting your peace, your dignity, your sanity. I now share my story with other soldiers, friends, and anyone who listen about emotional and financial safety, about trust, about red flags, and about the courage to reclaim control when someone else thinks they can take it from you. I also learned to forgive myself for trusting too much, too soon, because trusting is not a weakness, it's a risk. And sometimes, taking that risk teaches you lessons you couldn't learn any other way. Rachel is no longer a part of my life. I don't hate her anymore. I remember the betrayal, the sleepless nights, the panic, the slow realization that the person I loved most could hurt me the worst. And I remember how I reclaimed everything: my home, my finances, my peace, my power. I turned the pain into strength. I turned betrayal into liberation. Being deployed for war tested my body, my mind, my courage. But being betrayed by the one I trusted the most tested my soul, and surviving that, thriving after that, has made me invincible in ways no combat mission ever could. I may have fought overseas, but the real enemy was right here all along, and I won.